breaded chicken cutlets all the time for dinner, but the first time I made chicken schnitzel, my daughter said, "These are fancy," and I knew just what she meant because the chicken is pounded thin, the breadcrumbs have a very fine, even texture, and as the chicken cooks, the coating puffs up. So the key to making a good chicken schnitzel is first to start with the right cut of chicken. Now these are boneless, skinless breasts, and you want to make sure you get them between 6 and 8 ounces. That's because you want them big enough to cut in half into good cutlets. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim off any fat right along the outside. You can see this white line here. I'm just going to trim that off. There we go. And sometimes in this corner, there's a little knob of cartilage and a little bit of vein, so we'll cut that off. All right, so that looks pretty good. Now to make a cutlet, you want to lay it flat on the board and rest your hand flat on top. And then using your knife, you want to go right through the center horizontally through the cutlet. And it's not a bad thing to open it up and see how you're doing, seeing that it's even. And then you can just take your time and open it right up, make it as even as possible. This is fun because this is where it makes a little heart. And I've seen recipes that leave schnitzel in this nice big piece, and when you pound it out, it's as big as your head. And that's fun, but they're very hard to cook evenly that way. So cutting them into these smaller sizes is just more efficient. I'm just gonna finish up these last few cutlets and wash my hands, and then we can get to pounding. All right, so now it's time to pound the cutlets to a nice even thickness, and that's gonna make them cook at the same rate and make them tender. So it's easiest to do this between sheets of plastic wrap, and you can just use a small piece of plastic wrap and do them one at a time, or you can do it catering style like I like to do, which is do them all at once. So you lay out a big sheet of plastic wrap, you put all the cutlets down. That was 4 boneless, skinless chicken breasts, so it's 8 cutlets. And then a nice another long piece of plastic wrap over the top. And now you get pounding. So you really want to focus on that thicker end of the piece of chicken, and you want the whole cutlet to be about 1/4 of an inch thick. All right, that looks pretty good. Because the cutlets are nicely spread out, it's a great time to season them, and the seasoning won't get all over your counter. Now we're going to use a total of 2 tablespoons of kosher salt. I know it's a lot, but there's no other seasoning anywhere else in this recipe. Not in the breading, not in the egg, not in the flour. So you really want to season these cutlets well. And a good amount of pepper, about 1/8 of a teaspoon of pepper per cutlet. Flip them over and don't forget the second side. I'm just gonna now set these cutlets aside right back on the cutting board, and we can move on to the breading. For the chicken schnitzel, we're going to use a classic bound breading, which involves flour, eggs, and breadcrumbs. We're going to use 2 large eggs, but the trick here is to add a little bit of vegetable oil, about 1 tablespoon. This will help loosen the eggs up, but also help make that egg coating a little more flexible. That'll help that coating puff as the chicken cooks. So you just want to, with a fork, whisk together the eggs and that vegetable oil. So we have the flour with the eggs, and last but not least, the breadcrumbs. So taking each piece of chicken into the flour. You know, I know a lot of people that are really good at using one hand for the dry ingredients and one hand for the wet ingredients, but I get it all mixed up and I wind up with breaded fingers. So I find it easier just to use a pair of tongs. You want to shake off any excess flour, just a thin coating, right into the egg. You want to make sure it gets fully covered. You want to hold it up and let that egg drip off and right into the breadcrumbs. Now, you can't just use any breadcrumbs if you want to make a good schnitzel. You need very fine, very dry breadcrumbs, the kind you buy in a canister at the supermarket. You want to make sure they're unseasoned because the seasonings in those breadcrumbs usually don't taste very good. So, packing the breadcrumbs on, shaking them off, and we're just going to lay it onto a wire rack. All right, so I'm just going to continue to bread all of these cutlets. These cutlets now need to sit for about 5 minutes to really help that coating set before we cook them. While that breaded chicken is resting, I'm going to make a quick fennel apple remoulade that tastes delicious with the schnitzel. So a remoulade is a classic French sauce that's based on mayonnaise. So this is a 1/4 cup of mayonnaise. Now traditionally the remoulade has a lot of capers in it and usually some herbs, but this time we're punching it up and adding some vegetables, so it's almost as much a salad as it is a sauce. Mustard is another classic flavoring, and this is 2 tablespoons of whole grain mustard, and the texture of those whole grain mustard when those little seeds pop in your mouth is one of my favorites. Capers, as I mentioned, is a traditional ingredient. This is the caper brine. Just a tablespoon adds a good little zing. And last but not least, a little bit of lemon, about 2 tablespoons or so. I'm just gonna use this citrus press to get the lemon juice out. That's about 1, that's about 2. All right, so I'm just gonna whisk this together. And some capers. This is 2 tablespoons of capers. Now on to the main attraction. First up, an apple. And I'm gonna cut this apple into matchsticks without having to core it first. We're gonna cut around the core. So I'm gonna slice down on one side, spin the apple down on the other side, and just cut around the core so you have a straight core. And sometimes I save that to nibble on it later. Now taking one of these pieces, I'm gonna slice it about 1/4 inch, because that's what you want, 1/4 inch thick matchsticks. Slice it into nice planks, and then you can slice each plank down into a nice matchstick. That's it for the apple, and I'm gonna put it right into the dressing. Next up, we're gonna add some celery, and this is 4 stalks of celery. So I'm gonna trim off the ends, and notice I trimmed off the edges on a bias. That's because I'm gonna slice it nice and thin on a bias, which I just think looks really pretty in a salad. All right, celery goes into the bowl with the apple. And last but not least, the fennel. This fennel has beautiful fronds on top, and while I'm gonna trim most of them off, I'm gonna save a few of the pretty looking ones because that's a nice herb garnish for the top. And onto the bulb of the fennel. So the first thing you wanna do is cut it in half, and the bulb has an oval shape, so I like to cut it lengthwise, and then work with each half independently. So I'm gonna trim off the bottom, and then open it up. You can see this core on the inside. I'm gonna use the tip of my knife to cut that core out. There we go. And then laying the bulb flat, I'm just gonna slice it crosswise into very thin slices. If you get down to the end and you don't have a lot to hang on to, start to pull apart these pieces and you can slice them individually. And then we'll just repeat that for the second half. And that's it for the fennel. Gonna add it to the bowl. So now just toss it all together. Make sure everything's nice and evenly coated with that dressing. All right, a little bit of salt and pepper because we didn't put any in that dressing. So I'm gonna use my good finishing salt here. Fresh ground pepper. Toss it in. Now it's time for those finishing fronds, which have a very nice, delicate flavor. And it's nice to use as much of the whole part of the vegetable as possible. Just gonna mince them up like they're an herb, and I'm gonna sprinkle it on top. That's it for the Apple-Fennel Rémoulade. We also have a terrific recipe for cucumber dill salad. That tastes pretty good with chicken schnitzel, and you can find that on our website. Time to fry the chicken schnitzel. And what I have in this pot is 2 cups of vegetable oil that I'm heating up over medium-high heat. And the trick is to get the oil good and hot, right around 350 degrees. You have to tip the pot on its side and let the oil pool to one side of the pot. There we are. All right, so now time to add the chicken. We're only gonna add 2, maybe 3 cutlets at a time, depending on their size. And I'll start with 2. And this is the other key to making a good schnitzel, is to shake the pot gently as it cooks. Because you want the oil to lap over the top of the cutlets. That way they'll cook evenly and you'll get a nice sustained puff on the coating. We're gonna cook these for about 1.5 minutes on each side till they're nice and golden. Oh, beautiful. All right, flip them over and cook for another 1.5 minutes. Now these cutlets are so thin that they will definitely cook through in just 2 to 3 minutes. And you don't really need to take a temperature of the meat, but you do want to keep taking a temperature of the oil so that it maintains around 350 degrees. These are beautiful and they're ready to come out. I'm gonna put them on a paper towel lined tray and you can see that puff. That is a good schnitzel. All right, just gonna flip them over once or twice, try to get any extra oil off. Oh, that puff. That is a good puff. All right, I'm gonna keep these warm in a 200-degree oven while I finish frying the other cutlets. Oh, you can see this one's puffing so much it's sticking right out of the oil. It's a good sign. All right, flip them over so they can cook on the second side. Oh, look at that puff. Very happy with that. All right, keep these warm in the oven while I cook the last batch. Time to eat. Look at that schnitzel, look. Now for a hefty dose of this salad, because I love this salad. Give it a little stir first, make sure that dressing is nice and incorporated. A little more. Last but not least, a little squeeze of lemon right on the chicken. Oh, that's a beautiful piece of chicken right there. All right, I gotta point this out. Look at that puff. That's why chicken schnitzel is so elegant. It has that souffled look and that delicate crust. It's such a simple recipe, but when it's done right, man, does it taste good. So if you want to make the ultimate chicken schnitzel, remember to use fine dried breadcrumbs. Heat the oil to 350 degrees and shake the pot as the chicken cooks. So from America's Test Kitchen at Home, a marvelous recipe for chicken schnitzel. Thanks for watching America's Test Kitchen. What'd you think?
Well, leave a comment and let us know which recipes you're excited to make, or you can just say hello.
You can find links to today's recipes and reviews in the video description.
And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.
See you later.
I'll see you later.